Hey guys, Stockaholics, thank you guys for being here today. Recently, I noticed that gold has been not performing very well. The Fed came out and announced that they might thinking about tapering in a few years from now, and people took that as a signal, perhaps, to consider selling some of this commodity. Um, I don't really have strong opinions on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about why I think gold is a hard commodity. And I don't mean that in terms of the metal, it's a soft metal. What I mean is that I think it is a difficult commodity to invest in profitably in the long term. And some of the reasons that it's a rare metal or it's valuable in the first place are some of the reasons why I think that makes it difficult. I know people have some very strong opinions on why they invest in this metal. A lot of those ideas I agree with. I just don't know that those pertain to an investment case in this metal. I wanted to share some of my thoughts on that. And I think I wanted to share about if you wanted to invest in gold, and I might at some point in the future, what I would think about. What are some of the things that I would look for in this commodity in terms of supply and demand? And I think that's one of the things a lot of people kind of miss with this commodity. They get all wrapped up in the material, their narratives, and they don't think too much about supply and demand with this thing. Okay, so I thought we would start with what I think a lot of the case for investing in gold is in the first place, and that is that currencies, they depreciate over time. So if you use your currency, put it in a gold or a silver bar or a coin or whatever, that is more likely to retain value over time compared to the currency. And this narrative, it makes sense. I agree with it. If you look at, this is, by the way, this is taken from a gold site that sells gold. So that's why I think that this is one of the, you can find these on a lot of sites. So this is a lot of the reason, at least the people out there who sell gold, the case they try and make to the public, right? So if you look from 1910 till about today, the dollar was worth 26 times as much at that point. So if I had held a dollar for 100 years, I would have almost no money compared to when I started, right? Kind of the problem I have with this argument, though, is that you can hold almost any asset, right? You can hold businesses, you can hold other commodities, you can hold real estate, you can hold all kinds of things that are good inflation hedges, right? But for gold, this is the main argument. When for all of those other different commodities, that is usually not the case for the main reason people invest in them. Okay, so you're allowed to have different opinions, by the way, if you completely disagree with me. I know people have very strong opinions on gold. What I notice, one of the patterns I notice with a lot of the people who invest in gold, they don't actually think about it in terms of an investment. Instead, they think about it in terms of kind of like a preparation. So, for example, I live in Hawaii, and every 20 or 30 or so years, a hurricane comes through here, and it is likely to kind of destroy everything, right? So what you could do to prepare for that is I could hold water, and so I could have some water jugs, I could have some canned food, I could have maybe some other things that could tie me through that time that is likely to happen at some point in the future. And keep me alive, keep me safe, right? I think what a lot of people do with the gold and gold miners is they kind of have that same narrative where, like, when we think about money and we know that all money is eventually going to end up worthless, they think, well, okay, if I go and invest in some gold, when shit hits the fan, I'm going to have all this gold, and then I can use that. It's going to have a lot of value compared to all kinds of other assets. And then when society collapses or whatever it may be, I can use that and leverage this thing that has intrinsic value against currency that doesn't, right? The problem I have with that is that if if and when a currency collapses, there's going to be a lot bigger problems than maintaining your wealth. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of a preparation lens, to me, it would make a lot more sense to do a lot of the things you might do with the hurricane. You might have some food. You might have, a bucket full of, what is that, like weight gainer, a couple of those. You might have firearm. You might have bullets. A lot of people think, well, okay, if and when, currency ends up worthless, I'm going to have all this gold saved up. There's going to be bigger issues, right? And, you don't want to be the guy who's got all this gold when, I don't know, when, there's probably some bigger problems that are going to be likely to be taking place in society if and when that happens, right? And if you wanted to hold a little bit of this stuff for this reason as an insurance, I don't really have a problem with that. I think that's fine, but I wouldn't mistake that as an investment. That's not investing. And this guy, he does a very good job, Peter Schiff, of kind of merging these two ideas. He goes and he sells this narrative that, the dollar is eventually going to end up worthless. The US government is printing away all your money, your value. And, a lot of that is true, but this guy, Peter, he's also selling gold. He's selling this narrative, and his business is to literally make money selling this narrative. He's exploiting people's fear, all right? So that's kind of the problem I have with a lot of these narratives. People aren't purchasing it in terms of an investment, in terms of kind of being in a better place in the future. They're purchasing it in terms of being afraid or thinking the future is going to be much worse than it is now. And that's just not a good reason to invest, right? There's another group of people, they just buy it as a speculation, right? Many people simply buy gold thinking the price is going to go up, But the thing is, when a lot of these people, they do this, they notice that gold is going up for a certain period of time, but gold has supply and demand forces too, just like any commodity, right? At a certain point when the gold price gets high, there's people out there that can sell it, and that's going to cause price to go down. So there's a lot of Johnny-come-latelys, I think, that happen, and every time gold goes on a little bit of a bull run, yeah. And this is kind of the same. People may not like to hear this. It's a lot of the same patterns I notice with the crowd that invests in Bitcoin fervently. They notice that the price can go up over time, and they want to buy it not necessarily because of any supply and demand case or even understanding the Satoshi, the narrative, decentralized money or anything like that. They just buy it because they think that it's going to go up. Okay, instead, I think there's a better way to think about gold, and that is that gold, just like all commodities, is a cyclical commodity with supply and demand forces. A lot of the main reason that gold can either go up or down during periods of time is because of economic expansions in countries that purchase a lot of gold, or because of economic contractions where there's more demand for whatever the currency is at that time, right? And when you're investing in this commodity, you should understand that. You shouldn't just buy into the narrative, a fear-based narrative. There is some supply and demand with gold, just like all commodities, yeah? Now, unlike a lot of other commodities, gold has some problems that make it very difficult for me personally to invest in compared to other commodities. When I think about lumber, not that hard. When I think about copper, not that hard. But when I think about gold, it has some properties that make it much harder to invest in compared to some of the other ones. So the first one I wanted to mention is like the one I talked about a little bit before, is fear. So when people get scared, when there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, especially in countries that have the resources to purchase a lot of gold, what happens is that the gold prices tend to go up. So for example, when there were the COVID lockdowns that took place last year, drove the price of gold up, right? To me, these aren't events to purchase gold in. These are extrinsic events, and I talk a lot about tankers. There's a lot of extrinsic events in tankers. These are extrinsic events to sell your gold into, right? But it takes a lot of courage to do that, and most people don't have a lot of courage when they're thinking about this thing. Again, a lot of the reasons they purchase it is from a fear-based narrative to begin with. So to have the courage to sell when one of these fear-based events take place is probably pretty difficult. Probably be difficult for me if I was owning this stuff, right? The second is there's storage of this stuff, right? So unlike a lot of other commodities, gold is very unreactive. It's inert. It sticks around, and this is probably one of the reasons that has made such a it's been used as current money for such a long time, right? In coins and stuff like that. It doesn't oxidize, it doesn't break down like a lot of other metals do. But the problem with this is that there's people out there that store the stuff, right? There are central banks that hold a ton of this stuff. There's ETFs that hold tons of this stuff. There's jewelry in people's houses, and it doesn't break down. So whenever some of this stuff is pulled out of the ground, it is durable. And it stays there. Once it's out of the ground, it stays out of the ground. So it can come back into circulation, unlike a lot of other commodities that are just consumed. Like lumber, you build a house, it breaks down over time, and you could recycle it, but it's difficult. You know, copper breaks down over time. You can recycle it, you could resmelt it, but you're probably going to have some metal loss. That's not the case usually to the same levels with gold. You know, gold is it's gold. It's there, and it's going to be gold 1,000 years from now, right? The final thing I think a lot of people need to think about with gold are its use cases. So if you're basing an investment decision on gold, you need to think about what it's used for. That's the demand side, and we're going to take a look at that on the next slide. Okay, so if we're thinking about creating a bull case for gold, we need to think about the demand cases for gold. And these are the uses for gold, the 10-year average of gold demand by sector, and this is according to the World Gold Council. So here we have the main use for this product is in jewelry. We have technology over here is approximately 10%. We have investors who purchase it in terms of bars or gold. We have ETFs that hold this in certain places. And then we have some central banks that kind of use this stuff, right? So I think probably the most important thing, if you are interested in developing a bull case for this, would be to think about the thing that it's most used for, and that is probably jewelry, right? Now, what do you think about, for me, what are the things I think about in terms of when people buy jewelry? When is the most demand for this product going to happen, right? It would usually have to be during periods of economic expansion when people have higher than average incomes, right? So that would probably increase the demand for jewelry, right? So the other thing you need to think about with jewelry, though, is that once jewelry is produced, most of that jewelry stays on the market, right? So, you know, maybe there's some, you know, gold rings that fall down the garbage disposal and get lost. But most jewelry, even if it's stolen, it's going to be in circulation somehow, right? It doesn't, that's one of the properties of gold. It's very stable, right? It doesn't tend to break down. Maybe some people mail that to one of those the buy gold now kind of places or whatever, where they purchased your jewelry and they smelt it. There might be some gold that is lost through the re-smelting process of people's jewelry. But for the most part, what I mentioned, right? Once jewelry is created, it stays on the market. So really, if we're going to develop a bull case for gold, it would have to be that there's going to be continued rising incomes in the world. And I think that's likely, that's possible, very likely, by the way. And the other is that there's going to be more people who are purchasing this stuff, right? So population would have to go up, right? And the thing is, though, for me personally, with gold, is it's kind of like one of the outliers in an economic expansion phase. You know, when I'm thinking about all of the things that people buy when they're doing very well, They may go out, they may go buy a house if they're starting to do very well. You know, they may buy a new car. But there might be some steel used in that car. They may, you know, there's a lot of different things that they could purchase, right? When you're thinking about jewelry, these are one of like the last things that people, on average, this isn't probably true of everyone. I'm sure there's a lot of jewelry enthusiasts out there. It's one of the last things that people are going to purchase. You know, they're going to purchase technology, and that's cool. There is some gold in there too. They're going to purchase all of these other things, and then jewelry is kind of like the most marginal part of spending. So for me, it's hard to develop a bull case for gold, because there's so many other ways, in my opinion, better ways to play an economic expansion, right? Okay, so here's another way to kind of look at gold demand. This is by quarter for the last 10 years. And then we can see that there's different uses. There's by sector: jewelry, technology, investment, central banks, etc. One of the things you notice oh, by the way, there's the gold price that's overlaid here, right? So one of the things I've noticed is that, you know, it's not a clear, there's not a clear pattern of an increase in demand. So that's one of the things that I would like to see if for an investment case in gold. You know, I'd like to see that more and more people are interested in purchasing jewelry or the technology, etc. It almost looks as though the usage of the gold and technology has actually been a little bit decreasing over time, right? So it doesn't get me too excited about that, especially when we're in a technology-based society. But there is something that's really interesting that I found here, is that if you look from last year, if you look at the gold in quarter 1, 2, and 3 of 2020, you'll notice that there was a tremendous increase in investment in gold. There were people out there who were buying tons of gold because they were scared. There was that fear-based investment idea, right? So, and I think what could also be the case, maybe some of this increasing price is actually restrictive of demand. I don't know if that's, I mean, it doesn't seem that was the case over here, but it could seem like that might be the case over here, as this increase in gold price, it appears to me that it may also be decreasing demand a little bit. Okay, and this is the supply side. So in terms of production, it appears also that the production of gold has remained it's been relatively flat over the last decade as well. Now the thing is, like a lot of mines, for example, when we're thinking about copper, there's a certain point when, you know, you pull a certain amount of this material out of the earth, then it's an extractive industry, or the oil industry is the same thing, right? When you pull this out, if you're going to pull out another another drop of oil or another gram of copper or another gram of gold, you're going to have to find a new source for that gold. There's a certain point when you mine all of the gold in a gold mine, for example, that if you're interested in maintaining this level of output of production, you're going to have to find a new mine. I don't know the detail of gold compared as detail as I do for copper. I know that the grades of copper are continually declining. And if you're interested in a bull case for gold, that would probably also have to be something that you would want to see as too, that for every ounce of gold that's pulled out, it's getting harder and harder to get another ounce out, right? I read somewhere there's a concept called peak gold. Just like a lot of people think that there's this is a controversial idea, where there's an idea where, you know, there's going to be a point when all of the easy to extract oil is pulled out of the ground, and the price gets to a certain point, it restricts demand, and maybe there's some other energy sources that can replace it. There's a lot of people out there who think there's also a point when you could reach peak gold, when there might be a point when the amount of supply can no longer, it's going to be lower and lower after a certain point. So I think an investment case from supply side, if you're approaching peak gold, could actually make a lot of sense. If you guys are interested in learning more about that, maybe I'll learn about that and make a video, but it's not something I know enough about in the context of this video. All right, so one of the things I don't really like is when you think about this from a logical perspective, right? If there are a lot of people who purchase gold as an investment, and there's a lot of people all at once, there's a lot of people out there that now hold this commodity, right? So that means that for gold to kind of increase in price and thus make it a worthwhile investment, there needs to be another increase. There has to somehow be more buyers out there, when we've already seen what I think is a pretty dramatic price move here, you know? So what that tells me is, you know, there's gold sitting on the sidelines. That we think about these people who hold it. There's bars and coins out there. There's ETFs, and then there's a lot of that jewelry, right? So, you know, you think about if gold starts to go up more, unlike a lot of other commodities, there's going to be an increase in supply, not from the mines, but from the people out there that are holding it as an investment. You know, they are going to make a certain amount of profit, and then that's going to push more gold onto the market, thus limiting the potential upside for this commodity. That's why I think that gold is such a difficult this commodity, is just because once it's there, it's there. You know, there's people who hold it, and then when it gets to a certain point, those golden hands, I guess if we were going to call them here, they're going to turn to paper hands, and it just it makes it difficult. Now that's not to say you couldn't play this successfully. To me, it's just too hard. There's too many forces for me that don't look good for this commodity compared to a lot of the other ones from an investment perspective. So I hope, and this is one of the things that decided I wanted to make this video for, because I don't hear people talk about gold in terms of supply and demand. That's really what motivated for me to make this video. So I hope this was useful to somebody. If you're interested in more of this stuff, let me know. You know, maybe I'll learn this a little bit better. Maybe I'll see that, or if there's something I missed that I don't get, I'd be happy to hear that as well. Anyway, talk to you guys soon. Hope you guys have a great weekend.